Up front on this edition of India Tonight, the Prime Minister Narendra Modi and his interview to the Times Network, in which he claimed that India of today has opportunities that were unimaginable earlier. In fact, the Prime Minister has also reminded voters of inflation during Indira Gandhi's time, and he has claimed that late Prime Minister Jawaharlal Nehru had once blamed the Korean War for inflation. The third phase of Lok Sabha polls has concluded today as well. 61% turnout according to the latest data that we've received. And the Prime Minister also cast his vote today in Ahmedabad. Now, how will Modi's claims on employment and on inflation, how will these influence voters and the outcome of these elections? Let's try and understand this with ET Now's consulting editor, noted economist Swaminathan Aiyar, joining us to decode the economic aspects of Prime Minister Modi's interview to the Times Network. Mr. Aiyar, on inflation, particularly, the Prime Minister has cited the Korean War during the Nehru regime. And he has spoken about how inflation was the highest during Indira Gandhi's time. Before I come to you, let's just listen into what he said first.
क्या बेरोजगारी और महंगाई आपकी सरकार के लिए चुनौती है?
आप इंदिरा जी के समय देश में कितनी महंगाई थी और मोदी के राज में कितनी महंगाई है? 2014 के पहले कितनी महंगाई थी? 2014 और आज तो युद्ध का समय है और आप हैरान हो जाएंगे जी, मुझे दुख होता है कहने से। लाल किले पर से पंडित नेहरू का भाषण है। उस भाषण में वो कहते हैं कि महंगाई इसलिए बढ़ी है ताकि नॉर्थ कोरिया में लड़ाई चल रही है। नॉर्थ कोरिया में लड़ाई, तब तो इतना ग्लोबलाइजेशन नहीं था और नेहरू जी को महंगाई मारती थी। अभी तो यूक्रेन वगैरह में तो लड़ाई को दुनिया पर सीधा प्रभाव है, क्योंकि वहां कुछ चीजें हो है, यानी फूड, फर्टिलाइजर एंड फ्यूल, तीनों पर इस लड़ाई का प्रभाव है जी, और तीनों महंगाई के मूलभूत चीजें हैं।
Mr. Aiyar, up front, this historical context that the Prime Minister is referencing on inflation and the impact of the war in Ukraine, which he says affects food, fertilizer and fuel prices directly. What do you make of it?
He recalls inflation back in the early 50s, when I'm afraid most of viewers had not been born. But it is a fact that the Korean War resulted in a shortage of all kinds of commodities which were being used for the war effort on both sides. Because of that very steep rise in all commodity prices, there was an increase in India too. While it is true that there were a certain number of restrictions on imports, actually imports were pretty free in those days, in the early 50s. Therefore, there was an impact. In the case of Ukraine, initially there was an impact. If you remember, the price of oil shot up. But then, when it became clear that Russia is going to be able to sell to countries like India, the notion of a scarcity disappeared. The prices are now quite reasonable. So, I mean, the fact is that inflation is a problem. To say that it was high in Indira's time or Pandit Nehru's time, I mean, these are people who were, I mean, most voters were not born when they were there. There's no point bringing that memory back. Also, that is the thing. You could bring back Rahul Gandhi's UPA too. Inflation was very high then. That again was because world prices of food and oil shot up between 2008 and 2014. Now, what do you say about it now? I can say at this particular point of time, inflation has been a problem. It has, however, been coming down. But let's face it, the Reserve Bank still says we are so worried about inflation that we cannot cut interest rates yet. So the RBI itself is saying that inflation is a significant problem, we cannot cut rates. It is not only voters who are saying so, the RBI no less.
Risk stands, and like you correctly point out, the RBI in an interview with ET Now as well has pointedly made a reference to inflation as an elephant that has just walked away and could return soon. What about the employment scenario? The Prime Minister has cited the PLFS, the Periodic Labour Force Survey, as a credible source for jobs data. Perhaps we should hear what the Prime Minister has said about the current state of employment in the country. Just listen to this first.
हमने चुनौतियों को चुनौती दे करके अवसर में परिवर्तित किया है, लेकिन आवश्यकता ये है कि चीजों को हकीकतों के आधार पर देखा जाना चाहिए। एक्यूरेट सोर्स से जो डेटा मिलता है, पीएलएफएस का डेटा, उससे तो विश्वसनीय मानोगे आप। पीएलएफएस के डेटा को तो विश्वसनीय मानोगे। बेरोजगारी दर पिछले 6 साल में सबसे निचले स्तर पर है। उसी प्रकार से ग्रामीण बेरोजगारी, यानी हर जगह पे आया कि भाई ग्रामीण इकोनॉमी बढ़ी है, ग्रामीण क्षेत्र में बेरोजगारी घटी है, ग्रामीण क्षेत्र में एक्टिविटी बढ़ी है, इकोनॉमी का सेंटर बनते जा रहे ग्रामीण।
Rural unemployment is going down is what the Prime Minister is saying over here, Mr. Aiyar, and basis that data that is being cited of the PLFS, he says that India's unemployment rate now is the lowest in 6 years. What's your own assessment on this?
It is true that if you look at the PLFS rates, unemployment has come down. But if you see where has unemployment come down most, it turns out to be women's self-employment, which includes working from home or working with your husband in his business. So there is a lot of questioning as to whether this can be compared with the earlier data. That is the real problem. But let us get away from the PLFS data. What is the attitude of voters? Do voters feel that unemployment is being solved? That, I am afraid, is not true. Not only that, one of the key issues is educated unemployment. The truth is, we have such a pathetic educational system that people are graduating both from high school and from college with hardly any skills. As a result, they are unemployable in the formal sector. What is going to happen to those people? Because as more and more people graduate from school and college, this problem is going to become bigger and bigger. I am afraid we cannot solve this particular problem until we overhaul the entire situation in education. And I'm afraid that cannot be done in 1 year, 5 years, or 10 years. This is a long-term problem, and a lot of it has to come from the state governments who are in charge of education at the school level. So as I said, unemployment remains a problem, especially among the educated unemployed. It is true that the PLFS surveys are showing an improvement. Nothing wrong with that, except you have to say that the methodology is not comparable with the earlier period.
This disconsonance, like you refer to it, between what the data is suggesting and what the electorate feels, Mr. Aiyar.
Yes, as I said, if employment was not a problem, I don't think Mr. Modi would be spending time on it. If it was not a problem, I do not think the opposition would be spending so much time on it. But all the surveys indicate that of the worries about people, if you ask them what are the key issues, I'm afraid it is employment and inflation. Now, let's say that this is not special for this election. I have been in journalism for more than 60 years, and in the vast majority of elections, the two main issues are employment and inflation. Once in a while, you get a wave on corruption. There is no such wave right now. In fact, this is the most uninteresting, unexcited election we can imagine for a very long time. There is no josh in it, no vim and vigor. And certainly on the economic side, you cannot say there is any vim and vigor. So, as far as the opposition parties are concerned, both employment and inflation are places where they are well placed to criticize Mr. Modi. Reference to data will not change this particular thing. The reality that people experience is coming out in the surveys, and I am afraid that does not mean they have been convinced by Mr. Modi.
So as far as the perception game is concerned, the voters aren't very convinced at this point in time. If you look at the surveys, is what you're saying, Mr. Aiyar. On the specific issue of reservations, the Prime Minister says that any kind of religion-based reservation goes against the Indian Constitution, and which is why he will not allow it. How will that issue play out in this election, in your opinion?
I regret to say this is a communalization of an issue. It has very long ago it has been known that you cannot do it on the basis of religion. But there are various states in which different categories of Muslims have been included among the backward, socially and educationally backward classes. So if Muslims are part of the educationally and socially backward classes. Please remember, the Constitution talks about classes. It makes no mention of religion. It therefore does not mean you exclude anybody. It does not mean you exclude Christians. It does not mean you exclude Muslims. So within the category of backward classes, Muslims can be included, always have been included, especially from Kerala, Karnataka, and other southern places, right from the 1950s. It is not new. What has happened is in recent times, more and more states have toyed with the idea of giving a special reservation. It is also true that in some states, when they say we are only giving it for educationally and socially backward people, including Muslims, if all the Muslims in that state are declared to be backward, I mean, that certainly needs a second look. There are some with the ashrafs, the creamy layer, they should surely be excluded. But if you just say it for backward classes, without doubt, Muslims can be included, and they've been included in Kerala right from the 50s.
So that's on reservations. Mr. Aiyar, when the Prime Minister speaks about development, and this is a key area, when you are referring to there being no women bigger in this election, as far as the ruling dispensation is concerned, they speak a lot about the development agenda that they've been on. At least that was the case before the entire religion and politics started becoming the mainstay of the kind of rhetoric that was flying around. So when the Prime Minister speaks about development, he makes a specific reference in this interview to the use of drones in manufacturing, in mapping, in agriculture, in defense, in transportation, in medicine. He speaks about AI, he speaks about Internet of Things, he speaks about 5G as employment boosters. Would you concede that the Modi government has done well on using technology to boost output and growth?
I have to repeat. Our real problem is that we are producing millions of school and college graduates who are unemployable. That problem cannot be solved by a scratch here and a fiddle there. How do you get away from this fundamental problem? There are all those people. Over and above that, of course, we have a situation where we missed the bus on labor intensive employment in the Nehru Indira days. So, having missed that bus, we are trying to get back on that bus. We cannot get back on that bus has left. I say that, for the low wage items, the benefit right now has gone to Bangladesh, Laos, Vietnam, and it will soon go to Africa where the wages are much, much lower. I visited Ethiopia. Indians had set up factories. One businessman said that the wages in Ethiopia are only 20% of Indian wages. In these circumstances, I would say that many of the labor intensive things, no matter what kind of subsidy or PLI you give, this is going to move out. So it's a sad thing that we missed the bus on labor intensive thing. Can you climb onto it now? I'm afraid not. So we have these two problems. We missed the bus on labor intensive industry. Secondly, we are producing millions of unemployable graduates. These are not things that are easily changed. I'm not saying that the Congress party or Mamta or anybody else can solve this particular problem easily, but the whole educational system is pathetic and must be overhauled.
Demographic dividend that India has, we are not able to use that well. Now, going by the voting turnouts, at the end of the 3 phases of polling we've had, it is generally believed that a high voter turnout would suggest a regime change. But the Prime Minister seems quite sanguine, and specifically when he was asked if 2024 is a done deal for the BJP, just listen to what he said about it.
मैं राजनीति में कौन आए कौन जाए, कोई देश ऐसा नहीं होना चाहिए जो किसी व्यक्ति के आधार पर चलता हो जी। मैं मोदी के आधार पर देश चले, ये मोदी कभी नहीं चाहेगा। ऐसा मेरा देश, ये मेरा देश तो बहुरत्ना वसुंधरा है जी। यहाँ तो अनेक रत्न पैदा होते रहे हैं, आगे भी होते रहने वाले हैं, और देश आगे चलने ही वाला है। हर एक को अपना भविष्य बनाने के लिए मेहनत करनी चाहिए, जनता का विश्वास जीतना चाहिए, जनता के सुख दुख के साथी बनना चाहिए, और वैकेशन थोड़े कम करने चाहिए।
The Prime Minister over there was defending the dictatorship jibe that the opposition has levelled. But Mr. Aiyar, just going by the current voter turnouts, what does that suggest to you? Till 5 o'clock, it was 60% in the latest third phase of polls. What do you make of this, and what do you believe the BJP's final tally would be on counting day?
The BJP was upset by the low turnout in the first two rounds. It is doing its best to create more excitement and more josh in the election, partly through these references to what the Congress will sell the entire country to Muslims, this kind of rhetoric. Whether that works or not, I do not know. But I mean, you listen to Mr. Modi's very, very touching speech. He says the country should not run on the basis of Mr. Modi alone. There are so many jewels. Okay, there may be so many jewels, but Mr. Modi is a Kohinoor. I mean, as far as the BJP itself is concerned, there is no other jewel to compare to Mr. Modi. So the biggest thing the BJP has going for it is Mr. Modi. And at the end of it all, you can have 25 different analyses of different issues. But if the stark choice is, do you want Mr. Narendra Modi or do you want Mr. Rahul Gandhi? I have no doubt that people will opt for Mr. Modi, whatever their other reservations. Now, whether he will get a increased majority or a reduced majority, that's another matter. But even if the BJP lose as much as 100 seats, they will surely get more parties with them. And so surely Mr. Modi will be back.
You know, I was looking at the voter turnout today. It's more than 61%, with Assam recording more than 75% voter turnout. Even states like West Bengal, more than 73%. And look at Chhattisgarh and Daman and Diu, more than 65% each. So voter turnout, we'll see exactly how that has a bearing on the kind of eventual numbers that we see. But Mr. Aiyar, it's a pleasure always getting in your perspective on all things related to the economy. And of course, we will keep reconnecting with you to get a sense of where we are headed, both economy-wise and politically. Thank you very much for joining us and for your time here on India Tonight.
If you like this video, then like, share and subscribe to ET Now.